Okay, everyone. So, welcome so much. Sorry for, for that in the beginning. I'm so excited to speak with our guest today as a part of the Miami Book Fair. So, a little bit of an introduction for everything. Good afternoon and welcome to everyone. My name is Enrique Rosell. I'm the program manager here at the Wolfsonian Public Humanities Lab at Florida International University. And I am so proud and excited to welcome to you our season 5 of Coffee and Conversations with the Miami Book Fair, promoting the Miami Book Fair. So today is episode 6, and we have such a timely and essential conversation waiting for us today. We will learn about author Tyler Gillespie's book, The Thing About Florida, Exploring a Misunderstood State. Okay, so the series, Coffee and Conversations, it began at a point about a year and a half ago in the middle of the pandemic when the WPHL and everybody around FIU in Miami was thinking about pivoting and thinking of the word pivoting and what that means. So we started Coffee and Conversations as a way of strengthening community ties and supporting the great work being done at many of our community partners around Miami. So we've explored topics about how the pandemic has affected museums and cultural institutions, the histories of anti-Blackness in museum spaces and beyond, and we've chatted with community partners from all around the area. You can see all of our past episodes of Coffee and Conversations on our Wolfsonian Public Humanities Lab YouTube channel. If you go to any of our social media handles and click the link in our bio, it can also direct you over there pretty straightforwardly, or if you just look up our name. But now with this season, we are again working with the Miami Book Fair. So we're so excited about that. And we're highlighting a number of Miami Book Fair authors to provide kind of like a teaser for the fair itself that's happening soon. So today, like I mentioned earlier, we're talking with Tyler Gillespie about his new book, The Thing About Florida, Exploring a Misunderstood State. And we have Julio Capo Jr. Moderating this discussion. So a little bit before we get started about how this is going to work, we're going to have a simple 30-minute discussion. And at the very end, we'll take questions from the audience. So if you do have any questions, you can go ahead and submit them through the Q&A box. And we will go ahead and answer that at the end. So without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce you to both of our participants or panelists today. So we have Julio Capo Jr., who is the Deputy Director at the Wolfsonian Public Humanities Lab and the Associate Professor of History at FIU. Julio is Miami born and raised and has conducted extensive research on Miami and Florida, including his award-winning book, Welcome to Fairyland, Queer Miami Before 1940, and as a curator for the exhibition Queer Miami, A History of LGBTQ Communities for History Miami Museum. Julio's research extends his commitment to public history and civic engagement. He curated Queer Miami, like I mentioned, the history of LGBTQ communities for History Miami, and participated in National Park Service's initiative to promote and identify historic LGBTQ sites, and contributed a piece on Miami's queer past for its themed study. Prior to entering graduate school, he worked as a broadcast news writer and producer, and his work has appeared in several outlets such as the Washington Post, Time, the Miami Herald, and El Nuevo Dia from Puerto Rico. So welcome, Julio. We love Julio. So excited to have him here as the moderator today. And also author Tyler Gillespie. So Tyler Gillespie is a poet and an award-winning journalist published in Rolling Stone, The Guardian, Vice, The Daily Beast, Salon, GQ, The Nation, and Playboy. He's the author of Florida Man Poems from 2018 and his new nonfiction collection, The Thing About Florida, Exploring a Misunderstood State, which we will be discussing today. He also wrote a chapbook, Dirty Socks and Pine Needles in 2012, and co-edited the humor collection, The Awkward Phase, The Uplifting Tales of Those Weird Kids You Went to School With in 2016. His creative work has been nominated for a Pushcart Prize, Best of the Net, and appears in publications such as The New Yorker, Brevity, The Los Angeles Review, and the anthology LGBT Comedic Monologues That Are Actually Funny. He holds an MFA in creative writing from the University of New Orleans and an MA in journalism and media studies from the University of South Florida. He's currently a faculty member in the writing and rhetoric department at the University of Mississippi, and we're so excited to have him here. Tyler's new book, like I mentioned, will be featured in the Miami Book Fair 2021. So without further ado, I will go ahead and pass it on over to our guests to go ahead and start the conversation.
Great. Thank you, Enrique. Hi, Tyler.
Hi, I want to first say thank you for having me. I feel really honored and excited to be here with you.
Likewise. I feel like we've been friends for a long time and I've never met you. So it's kind of amazing I enjoyed reading this. so much. Thank you for writing it. Thank you for sharing what is really like, I mean, the genre itself kind of defies easy classification. It's a little memoir, a little journalistic investigative reporting. It's archival work. Tell us a little bit, for those who haven't read the book, and they should, everyone needs to. See how I've gotten used to doing. Tell us a little bit about the book.
So, right, you explained the style really well. So it started off as more reported. So I had been writing some feature stories about Florida for different publications, and I wanted to kind of expand the writing because, you know, you only have so many words when you're writing for those kind of publications, and these stories I thought needed more space. And so then I kind of brought in the first person memoir aspects to tie in some of the narratives and have some moments of levity and subsequent drafts, right? So it was more like reported and some archival work at the beginning, and then that kind of voice came in subsequent drafts. And so, yeah, it kind of basically, I'll just kind of talk about a little bit about the structure. Basically, I started writing about, I was living out of state and people would ask me about Florida Man and like, what's up with Florida? You know, it's anytime I would be at a party. And I really was annoyed by that question, but then after you got it asked a certain amount of time, I'm like, what is up with Florida, you know? And so then after I finished my work in New Orleans, I moved back home. I had been writing about Florida. And so that's kind of what was the genesis of the book. And so I kind of look at the misconceptions about Florida and then my own thoughts about Florida and my own fears about Florida. And that's how it's kind of tied together.
I love that. As you said that, it reminded me of a quote. If I could just briefly read it, is that okay?
Please do.
Florida has been known as a sanatorium, a tourist destination, a retirement community. The state is just everything at once, a comedian once said. You'd never make Florida on purpose. My never made on purpose state begot weird news stories, and those stories eventually began the popular because Florida joke. I loved all of that because we've all been there. That is, as Floridians, we've had to be like, almost as if Florida exists outside of history or outside of, I feel like I get those kinds of questions all the time. They're like, oh, but then you went away for college, or you must have, you know, there must have been something you were searching for to kind of escape this space or something, right? Like, I guess one of the kind of things that you addressed a little in the book, but I kind of wanted to dig a little deeper was, who did you write this book for? Who did you kind of hope to appeal to and I mean, explain or better understand the state?
Well, I think for folks who are moving, because there's so many folks that come to the state every day. I forget the number, but it's always a lot, you know. And so, like you were saying, coming to the state thinking like Florida doesn't have a history or a connection to the lands as well, I think a lot about, you know, and kind of in a way the state has been marketed that way in the past, right? So there's reasons for that, but thinking that Florida is just a place to party and treat however you want, treat its people however you want. I think I was writing for, you know, them as an introduction to the state, maybe. Also writing, I mean, selfishly for myself to figure out some of these questions and just write about things that I wanted to know more about, because as a writer, I'm always, unfortunately for me, attracted to write about things that I'm scared of, right? So I wanted to be able to do that. But I think for, you know, folks who are coming to the state, and also for Floridians as well, who love their state and know a lot about it and really defend it. And that's not necessarily what I'm trying to do, but writing for those folks as well.
It shows, and I think it's a beautiful testament to this important work. You kind of just suggested in one of the questions I wanted to ask, so if we can kind of move a little bit in that. I hate that word pivot, but I think we can note it.
Right.
One of the there's a rawness often to this book. You share a lot of very intimate, a lot of, you know, there's a very kind of honest perspective here that I really appreciate. And I think so many people can relate to. What are, you know, were there some challenges in writing this book for you? Did you find it cathartic in some way as a Florida person, as a,
Some challenges, yes, for sure. I had been such in this journalistic mode where and I'm really interested in other people's stories, sometimes more than my own, right? So like I was kind of mentioning, that first person came in more in subsequent drafts. So I remember early on my agent saying like, don't forget you're a poet as well, um, and then my editor being like, that's because when the humor is there, it's usually I'm like poking fun about how pale I am or how scared I am, right? I'm not really interested in making light of other people's situations. I have a
right.
much easier time doing it about myself. So in those kind of serious moments, thinking about the levity, but it was definitely hard and that's challenging because I didn't also want it to be about me too much, which I think is a hard balance when you're kind of mixing these writing styles where I want to focus on other people and I don't want it to be too much about myself. And then that question makes me think about, a lot of people ask me about the last chapter in the book about growing up gay in a Southern Baptist high school and just community. And that was the last chapter that I wrote. And that wasn't even in the final manuscripts until like one of the peer reviewers said, oh, I really think maybe we should have something about Disney World at the end. And I was like, I don't have anything about Disney. I do have something about the Holy Land Experience, which is in Orlando, and it's a Bible-based theme park for anyone who hasn't been. So I think that through writing it, I was able to then write a more personal, like I think the last chapter is the most personal and the most raw, right? But writing the other chapters helped me get there. And it's interesting because a lot of people ask me about that. I think.
It's a powerful chapter. It's what I was thinking about. I'm happy you addressed. Thank you for writing it and thanks for sharing it.
Thank you.
So I have to ask, because I have to ask the Florida man stuff. That is, there was your analysis of Florida man or Florida woman or Florida person. I think is just I love that chapter. It's early on, and you offer a really smart analysis, almost like an origin story of the content and a kind of like historical context of Florida man, woman, person. Today, the kind of meme or joke or sense of humor that has made the rounds pretty well known. People, whether it's in late night comedy or just whatever. But as you know, and I was so happy you noted it. It's also become a way for people to essentially make fun of others, right? Like often poor people and people who are under-resourced or marginalized in some way. If you could just tell us a little bit about what it is, what did Florida, the Florida man kind of concept mean to you? Why'd you kind of explore it? Why'd you dig deeper? I mean, it's something you've done in your other work already and through poetry and through other forms of writing. And so I don't know, what can we take away from all of this?
So that was, I think, one of the first pieces that I wrote because people would ask me a lot about Florida man, and thinking about, I say in there, like I had a family member who had one of these kind of intense, headlines, but it didn't go super viral because of the way the internet works, right? So, I mean, this kind of like concept of Florida as a weird state tracks for, way back, but just thinking about how the internet has made these viral headlines and how they get circulated. And I mean, a lot of that has to do with our public record laws, like, and how easy it is to access. A lot of that does, I think, but that's not the only reason. I mean, a lot of it has to do with like underfunding for mental health, people that are in, dire straits. Some people that I think too, that aren't from the state, they don't have the same community connections. And then, also just Florida's been an easy state to make fun of. So it's a very shorthand thing. And I think that, in the book I write about how I was put in, the person that I write about was a friend of a friend.
Yeah.
And, she had been made fun of across the internet and didn't really want to talk to me. But then thinking, sharing my own stories and my own issue, like I could have been a Florida man headline if things would have gone shaken out a little bit differently. And so then I'm really interested in what happened next. And, for her, it was a turning point. So I also think that people are starting to reconsider the way they talk about Florida man, but also just in general with the way we think about the internet and how we talk about people and circulate news stories.
Yeah.
I think there may be a shift there as well and how people talk about it. and think about it, because there really is a person behind that mugshot. And that I've just, as a writer and as a person, I was like, what if my lowest moment was broadcast across the internet? How would I feel? And a lot of times folks don't get to tell their side of the story. So I wanted to try to at least tell one person's what happened next story.
I think that might have been my favorite part of the book. There's something so powerful about, and also just like this, the really smart and I think vulnerable way that your method in doing this, that is like in coming and making yourself so vulnerable to this person. Cause I think we all could relate to that at one point or another in our lives, we could easily be Florida man or Florida person, or right. That is that we've all done things that sounded like that's weird. That's not who I am as a person, or that's not like represent, or like things are misconstrued or perceived in a certain way. So you kind of digging into this one case and like providing the context in which Florida woman wasn't Florida woman, was actually the humanity of her life, of her. I thought it was such a beautiful thing, and I'm happy to see. Thank you. Like that is, I appreciated the humanity of it all.
Thank you. That means a lot. And I think what was exciting about her case too is that it was a turning point for her, and now she's been an inspiration to other people, right? Mm-hmm. Which I love a good redemption. But that being said, not all Florida men or Florida people are redemption stories. Like I'm not, don't want to paint a broad stroke over that, but there are some folks who use it as a turning point, I think.
Yeah, and it provides space we have to make room for those things, right? So often it's just like you become pigeonholed as this one, and the power of the internet thing, also, as Tyler notes in the book, and I hope I'm not giving too much away, look out, Arizona, you're next. Tyler thinks you're the next Florida. Why do you think that's true?
Well, because they have similar public record laws, and they have similar relationship to reptiles, and like a lot of weird reptiles there, so, and it's also, I think people are moving, that, and also I think it's a retirement state as well.
Yeah, there's lots of kind of powerful comparisons and I think parallels. I also just love, at one point you remind us that Florida, in the mid 19th century was more gators than people, right? Like this kind of like Florida as gator metaphor. I found that really illustrative. Like I just found that to be an interesting way of thinking about this space. So if there's one thing you would love people to take away from I don't know, is Florida redeemable? Is Florida, what is Florida to you? And what do you hope Florida becomes?
Florida is home, first of all, Florida, I love Florida so much, and I think that, I don't think it necessarily needs to be redeemed. Like it's complicated. It's, I think it's strange, but that's not a problem. I think that I really hope that Florida, I always think about the environment. Like I always come back to that. Like I hope that it's something that two things that I hope people will take away from the book is that Florida does have it's a place where people live and have lived for a long time. Alligators have been here longer, but people have been here for a long time as well. And I didn't learn, thinking about the Florida history that I learned, like I didn't learn anything about Florida as a place. And I grew up here, the Florida history I learned was from my family, but not in school. And so hopefully learning some of that, or, thinking about that will help folks. And then two, I think that, a third is that there are a lot of Florida stories to tell. And the more voices, I think, because it is such a diverse state and such a big state and so many pockets of different things. And then also thinking about a lot of the issues that we have, like when it comes to invasives or invasive species, or the way overdevelopment and water quality, like these are man-made things, right? And thinking about what it is that we can do, but also corporation, not just the individual corporation have a huge effect on it. So those are the kind of my three things that I would say.
I love that. There's this moment, I think it also happens early in the book when you kind of, you kind of tease it out in different ways throughout the other parts of the book, where you kind of have like the sort of like, I don't know, consciousness or like this awareness of like, I'm a Floridian, like, or like that is like, um, and then like, cause you kind of go through moments of shame or kinds of moments of disassociation or like there's almost like phases to being a Floridian, like where you, and I thought a lot as I was reading this book about the pandemic. I have to admit, in large part because, you know, where I live in Broward County in Fort Lauderdale now, just in the complex that I've been living in, it's the demographics have changed significantly in just in a year and a half. That is, so many people from New Jersey, from New York, came to at least temporarily to find refuge from the pandemic here, and so many of them have decided to stay. Like that is that there's always been, and you show us some of those historical parallels of understanding Florida as like a refuge from lots of other things, and I feel like it's the pandemic an extension of all this in some ways, that we see that parallel.
Yeah, and it makes me think of those movies, Final Destination. like that's a lot of people's final destination is Florida. But thinking about, economic issues and implications about rents and, living, being able to sustain, sustainable living. The parts of Florida where I grew up and like where I would live, rents are high and, things like that. So I definitely see like a lot of folks think, oh, I'll come to Florida, and then they end up staying here. But that's, yeah. And then quarantine was really interesting because I was in Florida for most of the quarantine. I quarantined with my grandmother, who I write about in a book, and is an at-risk person, so I really stayed in the house and thinking about that. Yeah, that's an interesting connection for sure.
Tyler also writes a lot about kind of different, that there's so many Floridas, right? Like that is, as here at FIU and as part of the Miami Book Fair, South Florida is often seen as not Florida, both part of and also independent of in some ways, like it's whether it's political, it's demographics, it's I wonder if you have insights on the role of South Florida in the kind of Florida story, or what you make of this space in particular in the telling of that narrative.
Well, I mean, you're the one that would, I feel like would be more qualified to answer that question. So, but yeah, I mean, not that I think of, oh, one place is more Florida than any, but I think South Florida is such an important area, not just to the state's history, but to the country's history and, to its future as well, for many different reasons. And I appreciate you bringing that up, because one thing about writing about Florida that I am aware of and that I'm self-conscious of is, like, as a white gay person, like, what stories am I privileging, or what am I thinking about, and thinking about the area that I'm from, and that's why I was bringing up how many, making space for all these storytellers, because those stories are super important, and there's so many different voices here. But I spent a lot of time in South Florida because I was writing about the Everglades, and which is always still so fascinating. I mean, I know we're on a time, and I could geek out about the Everglades for like ever. But yeah, I think South Florida, like I said, is such an important international destination, economic, historical. It's so important, I think.
Thank you for that. I agree, right? But also in general, I just think that it's one of those things where, like, it is and it isn't. Like, that is, it very much falls very much with the narrative you provide for us, which is that Florida is many things, and it's many things to many different people. And I think your analysis is so sophisticated in terms of race, of class, of gender, and of the way that different people navigate the space, largely dependent on those things. And I was really appreciative of that. So how about, well, I know we're running out of time, but I have one more. It's one of those things, like when I lecture like modern US history courses or something, I always talk about how little people understand Florida. It's like one of those things, like you could almost guarantee, like an election is gonna come down to Florida, or that, and yet there's very little attempt or to kind of take it seriously, or to really kind of dig into its history, its politics. its culture. Do you think do you find hope that people are going to increasingly start taking Florida in a new direction, or, understand it's like, that is, that there's going to be appreciation for what Florida brings to the table, and instead kind of unpack like some of the problems that it has, like that we understand that Florida man and Florida woman is in fact a socioeconomic issue, access to education and healthcare, that we understand all those things and how it kind of manifests in these Florida man memes.
100%. I mean, I think that's spot on. And I remember when the 2016 election was happening, I had pitched a story to a national publication about the college Republicans in the I-4 corridor. Because to me, it's like, this is a story, but they're like, oh, I don't think it has national implications.
Mm-hmm.
And
Wow.
as we can see, of course,
Wow.
and that's it. People talk about Florida, like almost a lot of our stories have national implications because of, I mean, we have a large population, but for many different reasons. So people need to start, they better, I mean, also like not to get too much into it, but like our governor right now, we know like he's probably going to be trying to run for president, and people are looking at him. So Florida, I mean, and our former president lived here, recently, so people better start paying more attention.
Yeah, goodness. And they're already 300 years, 400 years too late. But it's there's time to change course. Last thing, I know if I can, and I'm winking at Enrique to give me like an extra minute or two, if that's all right. But and then this will be this will be it, Enrique, I promise. But is there anything that you left out that you had wished you could include, that you simply didn't have the space or didn't fit in the kind of broader, vision for the book, but a story or something that you'd want to share with us, or
I originally was thinking about having a chapter about Hulk Hogan, as weird as that sounds, the rest of it, right? Because in where I grew up, he was kind of a local celebrity. And I also found, this story about, I just thought he represented a lot of different things about class in Florida, and the pageantry, the drama of like Florida, and the tanness, and his family. I was just really very interested in them. But then I was like, when we were talking about Florida men headlines not always being redeemable, I was like, do I really want to give space to Hulk Hogan, who, is, said some racist things and all of these things? Like that wasn't, I realized that that's not what I wanted to spend my time and space writing about.
Oh, thank you for that. If you have again, there's lots of thoughts there, I promise. For those of you who haven't, please go check out The Thing About Florida, Exploring a Misunderstood State. It's a powerful testimony. It's a good read. It's fun. It's smart. And Tyler, it's been such a pleasure. I'm looking forward to hanging out and chatting more.
This has been so great. Thank you again for having me. So much fun.
Of course. Thank you. I think Enrique's closing us out. There he is.
Yes. Hello. Thank you both so much. I am back now. Thank you both so much for this incredible conversation. I've been looking forward to this for weeks now. And I can't wait to read the book. I'm going to borrow it from Julio so I can take a read. And Arizona, watch out. Like you said, Arizona is coming up. But very interesting conversation about, what we should really be thinking about, when we're thinking about Florida and about what Florida man is. So I won't keep everyone much longer, but I do want to say thank you to everyone for joining, and for anyone listening from YouTube, thank you so much for joining and participating. You can visit WPHL online on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram at FIUWPHL. Follow us for any updates and future conversations like this. And also make sure that you come out to the Miami Book Fair. It's the 38th annual Miami Book Fair. It's happening November 14th to the 21st, 2021. So coming up in a few weeks at the Miami-Dade College Wolfson campus in downtown Miami. For a little bit more information or to RSVP for any of their events, you can visit miamibookfair.com. Pretty straightforward. Okay, and to access any of their virtual conversations, they're also going to be having virtual conversations similar to what we're doing here. You can visit miamibookfaironline.com as well to tune into those. And just a reminder, Tyler is just one of the many authors from around the world participating in the Miami Book Fair. And as you can see, Tyler is incredible. So I'm sure all of the other authors are just as incredible. Maybe not just as incredible. Tyler's pretty great, so who knows? And also the nation's no problem, no problem. And the Miami Book Fair is also the nation's largest gathering of writers and readers of all ages. They're looking forward to sharing their work, thoughts, and new ideas with everyone in person and online. So please make sure to visit Miami Book Fair for more information and follow the Miami Book Fair online as well at Miami Book Fair. And if you do go and post a picture, you can hashtag Miami Book Fair 2021 to stay in the loop with everything that's going on. So once again, thank you so much. Make sure to join us next week as well as we continue this journey with Coffee and Conversation Season 5. On Tuesday, we're going to have Rafia Zakaria and her new book, Against White Feminism, Notes on Disruption, moderated by Celine Leboeuf. And then on Thursday, we have author Eli Saslow with his new book, Voices from the Pandemic, Americans Tell Their Stories of Crisis, Courage, and Resilience, moderated by Andrea Fanta and myself. So come out to those two conversations next week, and we have more happening throughout November. Okay, so thank you so much, Tyler and Julio. It has been incredible. I really hope we get to work with Tyler much more in the future, and I hope everyone has a good rest of their day.
Take care. Good to meet you, Tyler.
It's so nice to chat with you. Thank you so much.